Everyone, it's LS, and this is going to be the patch 7.20 notes rundown. I've looked at a few things on the patch so far, so let's just get right into it. So first up is going to be the emote thing. Don't really care that much, that's great. Evelyn, she's coming out this patch. I actually already made a video on Evelyn where I talked about how I think that she's actually going to be a champion that is going to be quite good. She doesn't have any terrain scaling inside of her kit, and that is something that sometimes you use to determine how worthy is a jungler to actually be picked inside of the jungle. But anyways, you can check out that video elsewhere on my channel, and then I'll probably make another video about her after she's been out for a little while. And yeah, so looking forward to playing her. Next up is Brand. So now Brand actually ends up getting mana 6 to 18 scaling at levels 1 to 18 when he kills a unit afflicted by Blaze. It's obviously really good because of the way that Brand wants to itemize. He doesn't really want to go into mana that much. It's not like he wants to pick up a tier. Morellonomicon is not something that mid lane Brand actually wants to pick up right away. He likes the Malzahar route without the mana regeneration. Or at least that's in all of my experiences from seeing mid lane Brand. And you know, Brand was a champion that I thought would actually become really popular around the time that he got changed a little bit a long time ago, but he never ended up popping in himself into the meta. So obviously this change only affects mid lane Brand. It's not a buff towards support Brand. I don't think that it's necessarily enough to propel him back into the meta, but it's definitely going to help him out quite a lot. As what this ultimately ends up meaning is that his passive now grants a superior Doran's Ring. So it's really nice if we can actually make use of it and manage to kill the units while they're ablaze. Okay, Graves. Health regen increased, Q for shot scaling increased. So the health regeneration isn't something that actually matters. Graves, if you're actually competent, is almost always at full HP inside of the jungle. So the health regeneration doesn't really do anything to him. The Q at the end of the line gets a 0.2 bonus attack damage ratio added to it. This is obviously nice, but the problem is that Graves is taking a little bit of a backseat right now to Ezreal in terms of the ranged physical damage carry jungler. So I don't actually see these two changes actually mattering that much because the HP regen buff is a placebo buff, and then the Q at the end of the line buff, it's nice, but it's not going to magically make him somehow able to contend with other junglers. And obviously it scales further into the late game, and that can help him shine there. But I don't think that's enough to bring Graves back, although I do think that Graves is sort of forgotten about. I don't think he's as bad as people think. So that should be noted as well. Karma, passive gathering fire, cooldown, mantra cooldown reduction, 2 to 3 scaling to 2 to 4 scaling, but per enemy champion at, 1.1, 1.2 for basic attack. So obviously this is nice. It helps mid lane Karma, it helps support Karma. So it's overall just a nice little buff for her. Obviously, this also helps top lane Karma as well if you're into the tank Karma version of her. And I think overall it's a fine little buff. Sort of like Brand though, I don't think that it's actually going to do anything to affect her current standing in the game. So I just basically foresee her still being played the same exact way that she is now. I don't think this is a buff that is magically going to break her in any of her roles. So that's okay. Orin, so I'm really excited about this. So for people that maybe might not have watched any of my previous videos, I have a very large amount of games played on Orin, and I played him before the buffs and then after the buffs that they gave him before, and I talked about basically how it wasn't enough. He needed a go button, he needed to deal more damage, he needed something that just didn't make him feel like a walking clunky mess who didn't really have a passive at higher MMR. And I like the change that they took with him. So the Bellows Breath damage has been changed to 15 to 25% of the current health to 12 to 20% of the target's maximum health. This now effectively makes him a lot better at shredding tanks, and this obviously is going to impact him greatly the longer that the game goes on. So I think this is a absolutely fantastic change, and I really like the direction they went with Bellows Breath. Sarin Charge gets a extra 50 additional range added to the hitbox. I think this is fantastic too. His Searing Charge felt really clunky and weird sometimes, where you would end up actually missing terrain that you thought that you would hit, and sometimes you just actually miss hitting champions that you thought that you would hit, and it looked really weird sometimes. So I like that they added additional range to it, and I think that helps. The change here now on the Call of the Forge God, where the reactivation cast time has been removed, I think that's super fantastic. We talked about before how his R felt really weird because he had a self-lockout. And so you basically had to know how to plan your ultimate, or you just actually had to cast your ultimate from really far away. But even if you cast the ult from really far away, you would lock yourself out of being able to enter into the fray for a short duration, because you would have to reactivate the ultimate, knock up all the opponents. And that could leave you still being a little bit ways away from the fight and, you know, being able to help out your teammates. So, really like these changes. Don't think it's quite enough, but it's definitely in the right direction. And it's probably enough to make him actually a little bit more plausible as of a champion now in the top and support role. I still think that support is probably going to be Orin's best role right now, just because of how much it can make usage of his passive. Whereas up in top lane, if the top laner is actually good enough, they can actually play around Orin's passive, and they can play around it to the point where it ultimately, you still just have to teleport. And so that sort of takes away from him. In the jungle, I'm not entirely certain how effective these changes are going to be for Jungle Orin, because Jungle Orin just feels super gimmicky in itself, so don't think anything too much of that. Tahm Kench. I've missed him. So an Acquired Taste gets quite a buff. So I think that someone tweeted at me about the math. I guess he gets an extra 5 damage at level 1, which is enormous, because if Tahm Kench does an extended trade against the opponent, then that's just super big. Now, so the passive to Acquired Taste being changed is obviously really, really nice for top Tahm Kench, support Tahm Kench, jungle Tahm Kench. They all love it. The Devour bug, maybe this has actually been figured out. The Regurgitation lockout, 2 seconds to 1 second. I think that's really good for certain combos that I know that Tahm can do. Maybe this also has an interaction with fixing the bug that some people might know about with his W Devour. Do I think that it's enough to propel him back into the meta? Absolutely not. But do I think that it helps out support Tahm Kench? Absolutely. And I think that any buffs that this guy can get, he's really just going to love. I'll have to see what Tahm ends up doing with all the new rune changes. I actually haven't taken a look at any of the rune changes, so I don't even know what the hell's going on there. But maybe there's actually stuff inside of that can make Tahm Kench return to the meta as a top laner, or just, you know, further enhance him as a support. So really like the direction that Tahm was gone here. The Abyssal Voyage lockout, Devour no longer locked out after 1 second after teleporting. Great. Azir. Azir update seems to have landed well. Alright, so Sandy visuals, great. Talia, Seismic Shove, Cast Indicator adjusted to show the shove area of effect, great. Mid and 7.19 Janna updates, we already talked about these. I feel like the changes actually hurt Janna's ability to be a jungle, which is something that I sort of said in half seriousness and half jest in the last video, where I talked about Janna. Bonus magic damage, I mean, we already talked about the hot nerfs. She's still fine in the support role, but I think that the fixes and the nerfs to her take away the plausibility of her showing up elsewhere. So, okay, items, Asterics. I actually haven't read this. Total cost change is going up by 600 gold, and it looks like the path for it has changed a little bit. Total health granted 500, good. I'm Always Angry no longer gives an additional 30% damage for 8 seconds after lifeline triggers. Basic attack damage increase 30 to 50%. Up close and personal can only be purchased by melee champions. Form swapping champions only benefit from the base attack bonus while in melee form. Shield persists through the form swapping from melee to range. Shield waits 0.75 seconds before it begins decaying. Now gives 30% tenacity for 8 seconds when lifeline trigger. That's huge. Super, super, super big. Super big for Darius. Darius is going to get this as a 3rd or 4th item, which at that stage of the game, 600 gold is not going to be something that, like, you're going to say, oh man, I really wish it wasn't 600 gold here for these, additional benefits. Unless I'm, like, misreading something here. There's a lot of champions, obviously, that are melee that are going to love this item a ton. Obviously, one of the champions, though, that comes to mind that might not like this all that much is Gnar, because now it doesn't play into the super HP stack and stuff, because he's not going to be able to make use of some of this stuff when he's not in Mega Gnar form. But anyways, that aside, I think that for the most part, range champions don't really buy this item all that much anymore. There was that Graves build that would include Asterics inside of it, just as like a tanky bruiser type of thing, but even that's obviously not that common anymore. 80 carries at this point should just be getting Guardian's Angel instead of actually going into the Asterics, so I don't think that change really matters that much. I think it's overall a pretty good buff for the item, given that it usually comes in as, again, a 3rd, 4th, or 5th item. I think that the buff to, or the nerf, or the change to the gold accumulation needed to purchase it is completely fine. Drom's Fist. Health 150 to 200, max stack 30 to 20, still 5 per health stack. Okay, nice little change for Drom's Fist there. Ancient Coin Line. Coin restores less mana. Well, I don't actually think that's that much of a problem, because stuff like this can obviously be worked around with runes and masteries. As we already saw, supports are starting to get a lot more greedy with their runes and masteries sometimes. So I don't think this is enough to really prevent the obnoxiousness that is the current version of the coin. So don't think that's going to really be too impactful of a change. Spell Thief's Edge. Ability power increased. Ability power from 5 to 10. Obviously, there's going to be some champions that like to make use of this, but the problem is you ask yourself, does the champion benefit more from Ancient Coin, or do they benefit actually from Spell Thief's Edge? The only support champion I feel like really benefits from Spell Thief's Edge over going Coin is probably going to be something like Support Brand, Support Vigar. They're obviously going to benefit a lot more from Spell Thieves than Coin, but obviously something like Karma is still going to be wanting to go the Coin rather than Spell Thief's Edge. So, okay. Krugs, smoothed out Krugs, splitting animation, spell shields. Okay, we already talked about that. Last patch, honor getting changed, item set sharing, great, rotating game mode, bug fixes. That's it. End of the world for Riven. Upcoming skin changes, Elise, Italy, Nar, Annie. Well, everyone knows what you need to get. All right, so I guess that's pretty much it. So let's just recap really quick. We're going to make another video for Evelyn after she's released. Brand change, nice, but don't think it's really enough. Graves change, nice, and I do think he's a little bit forgotten about, but I ultimately don't think that it propels him into the S tier of junglers, or even probably the A tier, if not the... he might be at the lower A tier. Karma, it's nice. Obviously, it's going to enhance her current state, but it's nothing that's going to break her and make her become more frequently picked. Orin changes, I think that they're headed in the right direction, and I think that they're good, but don't expect this to suddenly make Orin some sort of a god, because it's not. He's also a champion that I feel like you sort of have to play a lot and get familiar with. I don't think that he's something that you play for 10, 15, 20 games and then suddenly become adept at. I think in that regard he's much like Bard. So, you know, there could be more room to research on the champ, and, you know, he might get picked up, but I guess we're not really going to know until leagues commence later on into the year, since he's not enabled for Worlds. But anyways, Tahm Kench change, really nice for support Tahm Kench. Obviously, top and jungle love it as well, and I think that Tom loves it as well, but we'll have to see exactly what happens with the new rune update, and if that can help out Tom. Azir Talia things are irrelevant. We already talked about the Janna stuff on Twitter and in the last video. Really like the Starax gauge change. I know that a lot of people have talked about Darius. I know that Freak talked about Darius on air during a cast, and I think that he was completely correct with, you know, where is Darius and all that good jazz. And obviously it is a little bit difficult to fit him in, but I think that any changes to tank itemization, and again, the rune changes that we'll end up seeing, and I'm going to end up making a huge video on that probably, because I haven't even looked at them at all yet. I think that this is definitely in the direction for helping out Darius and some other tank top laners that are not currently very popular, and I'm really excited to see what itemization changes occur in the off-season that might enable the meta to get completely shaken up. Drom's Fist, okay. Ancient Coin Line, it's not enough. It can be worked around with runes and masteries. It's not the end of the world, or they just simply aren't able to expend so much mana in the laning phase, which definitely you can just play around if you're a good enough player. Spell Thief's Edge, really nice buff, but it's only able to be made use of by a few champions. So that's pretty much it for the patch 7.20. Not too many changes. No change inside of this patch actually affects the meta whatsoever. So it's basically going to be a very safe patch, and in that regard I actually really like patches like this, especially as we're approaching a game state that is going to completely morph the face of the game, which is going to be the runes. So that's it for the patch 7.20 notes rundown, and I hope that you guys enjoyed it.